Multivitamins, maybe not beneficial for some people depending on their diet. Let's say you already have a healthy diet, right? That multivitamins kind of just insurance at the end of the day. For people who have soils that are high in organic matter, they apply their own compost, they use cover crops, they keep living roots in the soil, so their soils are already really good. Do you think you get much of a bump from using any of this?
There is a little bit of diminishing return. The better your soil is, the least demand you'll need for these is a soil amendment. And the reason is you're adding something that's already in abundant supply. You're adding humic acids because that soil is low in organic acids. If you got a soil that's high in organic acids, generally, it's a diminishing returns. The ones that see the benefit in the high organic matter soils are usually foliar application, where they're applying the humic acid as a biostimulant. And there's some really interesting research, and I'll give you one example. This was a cornfield in Illinois, and the researcher, his name is Dr. Dan Olk. They had a weather event, and they had one section of the corn treated with humic acid, and one section of the corn did not. And the weather event had taken and it lodged the corn. It laid it down, so it damaged the corn. It was no longer standing up. What was interesting, though, is it laid it down to a line where the humic acid was applied and where it was not applied. And they started looking at it and saying, okay, well, we've watched enough Sesame Street. We know one of these things is not like the other, so what's the difference? And they started looking at it. And what they found was the corn plants had more internodal roots earlier on. So those roots that kind of anchored that plant and helped that plant build its root structure out were in more abundant supply. So in that instance, it was foliar applied to the plant. And we know that even though it was a rich organic matter soil, we weren't really affecting the soil at that point. We were somehow stimulating that plant to either absorb more nutrients or make more nutrients available. Something was going on to cause that plant to be able to root better. And it could have been something as simple as phosphorus availability. We don't know the mode of action. What we do know is through a failed test plot, because the test plot was ruined at that point, but we did know that there was something occurring there, and it led us to start looking for other things. And we see the increased rooting ability in some of these plants. So, yeah, if you've got a soil that is rich in organic matter, a soil application is probably not the right tool for you. But a foliar application might be the exact tool that you need to make these products ideal for your situation. Just remember, again, one is good, two is twice as good, three, somewhere along the way, you're not getting more benefit. And what we've actually seen in our university trials is what they call hormetic curve, where you get a growth response to a certain point and then it starts falling off. So, 4 and 5 gallons the acre might be too much. Around 3 gallons the acre might be the ideal spot for, applicators. So, that's, good where we kind of base our numbers at 6 to 8 ounces per 1,000 square feet.
So a couple experiments people could do is one, if you're already applying something foliarly, isolate one row or one section, add fulvic acid to your application, apply that to one section, do the other section normally no fulvic acid, and see if you see a difference between the two.
Yep. And that's sometimes your observation might not be what you were looking for. Like the corn trial I was mentioning, where the roots, they weren't initially looking at the roots. And what he's also seen in subsequent years where the humic acid was applied and we didn't see much of a result, but it was a really wet year with abundant rain. But on the droughty years, all of a sudden they saw really significant results. So, is it helping that plant root out further? And in the years where it has abundant rain, you don't need the humic? Quite possibly. We're still, if you had a humic acid researcher in the room and asked these questions, hey, we got this nailed down, they're going to say, yeah, no, we're still learning. But we do know that, these products do have a nice effect, particularly with the nutrients, and that's the ideal time to use them.
If you zoom out, where do humic substances fall on the cost per acre chart if you think of everything from nitrogen fertilizers to kelps to fish hydrosylates to biochars? Where does humic substances sit?
On the very low end of the scale. I mean, these are easily acquired, as far as mining these materials. They're not hard to make. they're not nearly as expensive some as your fertilizers. You should be hundreds of dollars per acre like your fertilizers. They're a normal application of humic acid might be like $40 per acre.
So it's good
And
potential insurance. Like it's not that expensive to give it a shot, see if you see results. And again, not all those results are observable, and that's part of the problem with a lot of amendments. I think why a lot of them get bad raps, and I've talked to other guests about this, is you apply it and we visually can't see a difference, right? If I could dye the plant and have it absorb a blue ink and I could see the blue ink run through the plant, it's like, okay, I see cause and effect. Or if I
yep,
apply some sort of amendment, stuff could be happening, stuff could not be happening that I can see, I can't see. I just don't know. And I think when people can't see it or touch it, I don't think they're gonna be able to taste it. Then they started to say, like, yeah, is this worth it? The effort, the money, the time. I don't know.
I can tell you on the marginal soil, we usually see the difference. That's the time where it makes the difference. That corn trial I've referenced a few times, though, I'll tell you this: we had um, multiple years of doing this. In the most recent year, we actually did granular urea, and we went with on a per acre rate of 210 without any humic acid or a urease inhibitor, and we went 180 again with nothing added to it. And then we went 150 pounds per acre with the urease inhibitor. And if listeners are not familiar with what a urease inhibitor does, it slows down the conversion of urea to a usable form of nitrogen for the plant. So what happens is the microbes will break down urea into ammonium. And if it happens too quickly, the plant can't use it. It just goes off the air as a gas. And so you want to slow that reaction down so the plant has a longer opportunity to use it. So what we found, and this is very common knowledge, that the urease inhibitor at 150 pounds per acre yielded more corn than the 210 pounds of urea. So what happened is that nitrogen was available to that plant longer, even though there was less nitrogen applied. And we got a bushel increase, about 10 bushels per acre. Now, when we added the humic acid separate, so you've got 210 pounds of urea versus 150 and 180, the 150 got more bushels of corn. And then when we added the humic acid, we got 10 more bushels on top of that at a $75 per acre benefit. So what they were able to do is reduce their fertility by almost 25% and get the same, actually better result, $75 per acre and about 20 more bushels of corn. So that's not, unique to any, instance. We see that year over year on different crops. So if I was looking at this as a tool and saying, hey, how could I use this and make it a benefit to me? Usually it's through some type of conservation. So using humic substances, we're going to make that pantry in the soil bigger. So we're storing things that we might lose, like water or nutrients. And so sometimes using your humic substances might spread out your irrigation cycles. You might see other things benefit. So I had one guy who actually he said, "Man, this humic substance works like a fungicide." We're like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 wait! The humic substances don't do anything to kill fungus." He says, "No, no, I was able to use the humic substances, and I changed my irrigation cycles, and now my fungus went away." And what it was the ground was less wet and creating an environment for the fungus to grow, and so therefore he didn't have to use the fungicide. So he got a budget savings by changing the environment that was favorable for fungal growth. So sometimes you're going to see these little side benefits like water conservation, nutrient retention, or reducing, fungal favorable environments. There's going to be a saving somewhere and a reason for using it.
If I apply it granularly to the soil surface, how much water do I have to get on it over time to have it break down and dissolve? Is that gonna go relatively quickly into the soil matrix, or is that gonna take a while?
There's some components that will never solubilize. The humin, which is insoluble, and the humic, which is only alkaline soluble. The fulvic is going to solubilize, and so you would use that over a normal watering cycle. And you might see stuff on the surface, 6 months to a year later, but it's usually the humin and those humic components. The
So if
water
I'm
soluble, yeah, the water soluble component should be already in the ground and doing its thing.
If it's granular, I'm probably better applying it either before tillage or if I dig a hole when I put a plant in to put it down that way I can get it down where the roots are.
Yeah, there's never a bad time to get it down. Get it down when you can afford it and it's convenient. But ideal is more soil incorporation, the better. I mean, I've got turf guys who put, you know, 10 pounds or 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet, and they do it in the spring, and that's all they ever do. Ideal situation is like after an aerification, or sometimes you've got some, soil disturbance. That's the more ideal.